happening right now. Welcome to I can't believe that
happening now.
Wes, happening now. We want to welcome from our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room episode number 322 on March 20th, 2024. I am Bumblebee Jason Neiffer, the Executive Director of the Montana Digital Academy, the state virtual school located on the beautiful University of Montana campus located in fabulous Missoula, Montana, in the heart of Western Montana. And joining me tonight, as always, good evening, Dr. It's going to be one of those nights. Dr. Wesley Fryer, how are you tonight, kind sir?
It's okay. It's okay. We're going to give you more than, what was it? What was a 1AR? Was it 5 minutes? We're going to give you more time
it was
than
four to six, depending on which format. But yeah, it wasn't a very much time, I'll tell you
that.
that.
There you go. All right. Well, I am great. Hey, wow. Three live viewers already. My name is Wes Fryer. I'm here in Matthews, North Carolina, outside of Charlotte, where I am a middle school STEM and media literacy teacher. And I'm thrilled to be here with Jason. We had the week off last week, and we've really, kind of missed a few. But, ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited to say I was on spring break last week, and we got caught up on all the episodes. So we sometimes say, well, go to Facebook or YouTube for the latest. But yes, you can go to edtechsr.com for all of the show notes and small MP3s and all that good stuff that we always say at the end of the show. Are you in springtime yet, sir, or is it still wintertime?
Yeah, it's going to be a very Montana spring, like it is every spring in Montana. But it has been in the 60s and lower 70s the last 4 or 5 days. It's been absolutely beautiful. But it's supposed to dump snow this weekend, and
good.
It was pretty funny. I'm going to go home and hang out with my parents this week in the town I grew up in. It's Great Falls, Montana. And it's about a 3-hour drive from Missoula. It's a 2-lane road to get there, and it does go over a mountain pass, but it's a relatively light drive in comparison to some of the other mountain passes of Montana. But I was talking to my mom the other day to kind of make plans, and she said, "Are you sure you want to come? I hear it's going to snow this weekend. That it's going to dump snow this weekend." So I looked at the weather forecast and it said 4 inches. And so I said, "Oh, it's only 4 inches, Mom." She said, "Oh yeah, that's no big deal. Come on over." So that's a very Montana grandma for you there, right there. My mom saying, just 4 inches. Come on over. So.
Well, our daughter is in Colorado Springs at the Air Force Academy, and they received 2 feet of snow this last week, and it was supposed to be it was the recognition weekend, but it ended up canceling or closing the entire base for 2 days. In some parts of the foothills, they got 3 feet, and so that's a lot of snow. But I know that you are probably happy for the snow just because of the summer and thinking about fire danger. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Lowest snowpack. Depending which part of the state you're in, lowest snowpack in 30 years. In some places, lowest snowpack ever recorded. But yeah, we'll keep a close eye on that, both because of the prospects of fire and also continuing the drought that's been a very significant impact on my home state.
Hey, Peggy George is in the house tonight, which is just wonderful. We have missed you, Peggy, and glad to have you back. Being off Twitter, I'm sure that there are, more than a few folks that we're not connecting with these days. So what are we going to do tonight, Dr. Neiffer?
Well, Wes and I, like artisans, have collected a group of articles for you, the listeners, to talk about technology news, but not just about technology news. You can get that anywhere. We're going to shoot it through the prism of education and try to provide things for you to think about and discuss with your colleagues. And of course, the links themselves are available, even the many we oftentimes don't get to, at our website, edtechsr.com/links. And then also you can see our show notes for copies of those links as well. But tonight we have several topics. We will be talking about AI, which has kind of turned into a weekly thing for us. The so-called tech correction, social media privacy, media literacy, connectivity, Apple news, security news, and then we'll end tonight with our Geeks of the Week. Dr. Fryer, is there a particular place you'd like to start tonight?
Oh, let's see. I was thinking there was kind of a funny one. Well, okay, no, this is definitely not funny. I thought there was one though. Okay, sorry, I prefaced it with that, and I wanted to start more positive. Because we've got lots of other things. Let's talk about an affordable MacBook Air laptop. Walmart is carrying the MacBook M1 laptop, and they are significantly discounting it. So supposedly, and I have not seen this myself, you can pick one up for $700. And so that computer had been available for, basically $1,000 or on up, depending on the kinds of changes you want. Hey, Elizabeth is saying, it is Betsy. Congratulations are in order for Dr. Neiffer. What is that?
Why, thank you, Betsy. Yeah, I was awarded last week the Montana Educational Technologists Association Empowered Superintendent Award. And so nominated by a great member of our team for that. And I received that recognition from the Meta Group and the school administrators of Montana. So great honor for me, and more importantly, my team. And it's just a real honor to be doing the work that I'm doing. So thank you, everyone, for the recognition. That's great.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. And there is the link from umt.edu. And hey, I think that might even be the same picture we've got on our newly updated website. So cool. I'm hoping there was a large cash award with this. Is that the case?
There was not a large cash award. There was a stroking of my ego, though. So that's always good times. So
excellent.
Back to the Walmart thing. I threw that in there in part because I've been listening and watching a lot of reviews of the MacBook Air M3, which is the third generation of chip, and what are we, 4 years after the release of the M1 Max. And 4 years in Intel world can oftentimes mean a really significant difference in functionality. I think about like the 8th generation Intel versus the 11th generation Intel. 11th generation Intel took a huge step forward in speed and in efficiency. And I've heard a lot of creators and reviewers say that's just not the case with M1, M2, and M3. And they did, I think that the M1 is now depreciated, but I'm assuming they had a massive stock of them because they announced that Walmart is selling these now for $699, and that's the same version that I own as my personal laptop, right? And it's been a really, really, really great laptop. It's thin and light. It does have that older design for the MacBook Air, but to be honest, even in 2024, the MacBook Air design, I think, is a serious step forward from anything available on the Windows side of the world. And more importantly, it has great battery life. And so I would say that if you've been holding off, or more importantly, you need to send your kid off to college with a laptop, or you need a spare, or you just have an older MacBook sitting around 5, 6, 7 years old, at $700, that's a really unbeatable price for that particular laptop.
We have 4 of those in our family, and sending the child off to college. Yes, we actually we had Rachel purchase her own. Well, or I guess we shared it with her. But anyway, she's got that at college. The Air Force Academy does issue you Windows PCs, but they have a lot of security software, and they're rather slow and sluggish. But both Shelly and I at school have MacBook M1s, and then we have a personal one that was originally going to be her laptop, and I end up using it a whole lot. I'm using it tonight, in fact, because it's kind of cool to be able to have an admin account on your own laptop, Dr. Neiffer, if you can imagine that. So yes, I think it is a fantastic laptop, and it's well worth getting. Okay, I'm going to have to drop this one because I had not put it in, but we got to have at least one little humorous one. This is Ars Technica from today. Formula One chief appalled to find team using Excel to manage 20,000 car parts. And the subtitle says, Williams team leader may only be shocked because he hasn't worked in IT before. So Excel is, the workhorse. And I think there's just all kinds of folks that rather than write or have someone customize or whatever, a full-blown, database solution, have used spreadsheets for years to be able to do all kinds of powerful things. And I'll say as an aside, ChatGPT does a great job of creating custom formulas for Excel sheets. And anyway, I've been the beneficiary of that artificial intelligence assistance. But 20,000 car parts are, that is a fairly large large number of data points to be keeping track of. I don't know what I'm going to put this under. I guess I'll have to create a new miscellaneous category. So
nice. Okay,
all right.
let's do tech correction news, and I think that leads us very well into the social media and privacy article. I really want to talk about privacy article tonight because that was outrageous. First and foremost, as was widely reported last week, the House has passed a bill that could lead to a ban of TikTok if the owners of the company, which is ByteDance, a Chinese-based company, refuses to sell. And this is from the Associated Press on March 13th. It's, we don't need to necessarily talk about that part of that. I will tell you that in general, I've been fairly against this ban, not because I don't think there are concerns, but rather because I feel like that a lot of the concerns that are cited should be also cited related to other social media tools that are also broadly used in the United States. But I will say this past week's Hard Fork, the podcast from the New York Times, both Casey Newton and
Kevin Roos.
Thank you. Both expressed, I think, an attitude that I was surprised by, that they are concerned about the same things that the folks that were voting for the TikTok ban in Congress are concerned about. And so, there's a lot of inside politics here. It's unlikely to get a hearing anytime soon. The Senate leadership might not even bring up the bill for a variety of reasons. And a lot of Congress is maneuvering and grandstanding and drama. That's part of the model that's been true, even before we had our recent somewhat do-nothing Congresses of the last several sessions. But the bottom line is that we could be on the verge of a major crackdown on TikTok. And if you spend any time on TikTok, particularly younger creators, 20 and 30 somethings, are absolutely up in arms about this. And of course, TikTok last week encouraged their users to contact their representatives in Congress, leading to a flood of calls because you could just dial right from the app, which I thought was both an interesting strategy and maybe highlighted the point of the dangers of TikTok. There's some debate here. So I'll start here. Where are you at on the TikTok ban, Dr. Fryer?
Well, I also, I'm listening to Hard Fork for the New York Times as a weekly podcast, and I also was interested in this. I'm leaning towards it would be fine to ban it. I mean, we've talked about this for years in terms of trying to sort out, is there real security risk? Is this political grandstanding? But it absolutely was an example of the power of the ByteDance owned TikTok platform to sway voters and get them to mobilize in what just happened. In fact, there was a little video, and I had one of my classes brainstorm pros and cons and have a little mini debate about this in class this week. And I think it was an NPR, but anyway, no, it was a Today program. We watched a clip, and it talked about, kids were threatening suicide as they were, calling representatives. I just dropped in a link. This is from the Washington Post on March 12th. And the title is "Why Trump is Now Against a TikTok Ban." And I had heard this rumor. I don't think this was on Hard Fork, but here's why I don't think this is going to pass. We did not get immigration and reform and a bill about the border, right? Why was that? Well, it was because President Trump decided that he didn't want to see, Biden have a victory before the election, and so he convinced the Republican Party, which he basically controls at this point, to oppose that. And so similarly, Trump has reversed himself. During his presidency, he was talking about trying to force the sale of TikTok to a U.S. company. It's basically the same thing that is being pushed right now. The rumor that I had heard was that he had seen this documentary about Meta and Facebook, was really angry. I guess, well, okay, the film is rigged. The Zuckerberg-funded plot to defeat Donald Trump. Got really upset about it. That's what this Washington Post article cites. And so that he doesn't want to see Facebook and YouTube and these other platforms, but Meta specifically, the beneficiary. The Today Show program, and I guess I could put that in as well. It's just a short 5-minute clip, but it pointed out that India, did ban TikTok a number of years ago, and unsurprisingly, that led to additional rise for YouTube and Instagram. There were a few other platforms that popped up, but your point is very well taken, and it's in that article that you shared. The same criticisms that are being levied against TikTok, for the most part, can be levied against all of the platforms, because we live in an attention economy in which our attention has been monetized, and all kinds of folks can pull levers and pull strings and be able to do things, and they can do substantial things. And so I think, the irony that China would not allow this kind of an app to, be U.S. owned and have such a broad influence in its society. I have a Geek of the Week that's related to this as well. So there's a lot of feelings, but I think that the concerns are real. However, I think this is going to be more flapping in the wind, and let's see what happens in a few weeks and months. But I don't think we're going to see a ban.
Yeah. And I would add to this too, and there's an article that goes into some detail about this. This is from 404 Media, from Jason Kobler. The U.S. wants to ban TikTok for the sins of every social media company, and that's exactly how I felt about of all of this. That it just felt like that what we were really doing is forcing our kind of forcing our angst about the social media world that we're in, and the mistakes we've made, and the technological issues that have been introduced, not to mention the cultural issues in our society due to social media. And we're seemingly taking it out on the easiest to pick on here because there's a national security concern. Now, does that mean that I don't think there's a national security concern? No, I think they're right. And in fact, it was the Kevin Roos and Casey Newton on Hard Fork that gave me you pause about that. The way they explain it, they're both truly excellent journalists. But what I would say is that there are real concerns there, but my concern goes beyond TikTok. I like TikTok. I think it's a fun platform. I have learned a lot on TikTok. There's also some parts I don't like about the platform, and I'm sure that you can get a similar experience if a mass of people moved over to stories on Instagram, or even one of the other kind of upstart pieces like YouTube Shorts. But the bottom line is that if all we do is ban TikTok, it's not enough for us to deal with what I think is the core issue, which is the threat that social media has on or making fringe groups more popular, in spreading disinformation, in creating issues for mental health for our kids. And I don't think that we're in a country that could even pass meaningful social media reform. This is the best we might be able to do.
Okay. Let's go to what I think is the scariest article in our whole lineup tonight. I put it under security, and boy, this is an example of one that probably is under the radar. We're next to the TikTok proposed ban. It's not getting. I don't think it's gotten any airwaves. I mean, I just happened to see it buried down on the Ars Technica website before our show. Headline, this is from the 19th of March. Disabling cyber attacks are hitting critical U.S. water systems, White House warns. And the most shocking, and I think we've talked about this before too, like the calls coming from inside the house. China and Chinese groups, they say, have been inside some of our critical infrastructure systems for over 5 years. And there was a case that happened last month, and it was in Western Pennsylvania, and there was an anti-Israel message that was displayed, and these utility officials had to shut down a pump that provided drinking water. It was a couple years ago, I think, that Florida had something like this happen, where someone was watching a monitor and saw somebody had remote controlled in or whatever, remoted in, and they were able to control this. And they'd changed like chlorine levels to be toxic, and they reversed it. But I absolutely believe 100%, not 99%, but 100%, that our adversaries, and I'm speaking of China and Iran specifically, as well as Russia, have compromised critical IT systems in the United States today. And I'm going to have to be careful not to say things that are going to get me in trouble. There's some wars going on, and there's some stuff going on that I'm not saying anything publicly about. But there's a lot of people dying. And if we think that we are going to remain insulated across the oceans as we have historically, except for 9/11, it's just bad. It's really, really bad. And so if you read the comments, there's like 100 reader comments on this article. People are correctly pointing out we are just not investing what we need to invest to even do simple patches to our systems. And so cybersecurity is something that, Jason and I talk about kind of all the time in terms of how we need to be using password managers, protecting ourselves, protecting our families. So we absolutely need to do that level. But I think that we need to be advocating for additional expenditures on the governmental level, state level, even your local co-op and stuff. Like, I don't know where you get your water and where you get your electricity, but we need investments in these kinds of things. And sadly, as some of the commenters point out in this article, it's probably going to take some devastating cyber attacks to get us to wake up and say, oh, I guess the internet's kind of important now, especially since, you don't have to launch a bomb, or you don't have to launch a bomber or an intercontinental ballistic missile in order to exact a devastating impact on an adversary that lives on the other side of the planet. So I think that's like the most downer article of everything. So anyway,
Well,
your thoughts. You're in Montana, so I'm sure you're completely prepared for all kinds of apocalyptic events.
Yeah, to head up to the mountains with my solar powered flashlight. Yeah. So here's what I would say is that every time I read an article like this, and they're not infrequent nowadays, right? They're actually quite frequently featured in mainstream media. The thing I keep thinking is that I just don't want to be a pain in the tush to the security people on my campus. Because I do think that we have a very, very difficult situation that we are a part of right now, and it's going to mean doing some things that are annoying for sure, right? Like you mentioned your lockdown laptop. I have a lockdown laptop, and in fact, it sounds like we have the same solution. I just bring my own laptop to work, and then when I, especially for personal things that probably shouldn't be on the other computer anyways, I'll move over to that so that I can, have access to what I need to. But I do think that we are in a pretty extraordinary time, and I think that the author's right that it may take something very dangerous for us to get to a point where we're taking the threat seriously enough.
And IT directors and committees can lock down individuals' machines, and yes, we need to recognize that the points of entry for these malware and bad actors can be anywhere. But a huge part of the mitigation and proactive prevention of this has to do with patching systems. And I'm not going to be able to have the names roll off my tongue, but there's been different major compromises that have been huge. And one of the biggest problems is just that servers and things like that do not get patched on a regular basis. And in some cases, organizations are not staffed to do that. So let's go take it to the school level. As a recovering technology director, who honestly, I don't think I want to return to that world again. If you're not outsourcing a sizable amount of your servers to the cloud and letting dedicated teams that have security teams that are just like focused exclusively on that, being able to manage all that, that is a transition that we made, when I came to Cassidy School back in 2015. And it's that is a specific thing that I think when we hear about hospitals and I didn't put this one in there. There's another one I need to put in about healthcare. There's no 100%, but certainly as an individual, especially if you're have a small shop and you're responsible for all the technology, which sometimes we are, it just makes sense to be outsourcing some of that stuff that's that critical.
Yeah, and I would also note I did get a chance to listen to a national speaker on cybersecurity last week from the Cybersecurity Agency at an administrator conference, and his presentation was extremely good. But the couple of things I took away from that is that there's a surprising number of uncatalogued internet devices on a lot of networks. People plug some really strange stuff into school networks, and a shocking number of like unpatched HVAC systems that someone saw an Ethernet port, so they plugged it into the network without tech knowing about that, and it's been running the same software for 16 years, and there's no functional need for an upgrade, but there are several security needs for an upgrade, or maybe to shut it off completely or shut off the software completely. It's pretty extraordinary, and again, we're in a dangerous time, and I think it's okay to act that way.
Well, you're in the university setting, and so I'm sure that you all have multiple VLANs, and probably, you absolutely don't have a flat network. But again, when I came to our school in Oklahoma in 2015, we had a completely flat network. And what does that mean? Well, it means there's no segmentation at all, separating off servers from, business computers, things running development databases. Just the whole thing is flat, and so anybody could simply plug into any Ethernet jack on the entire network, and in some, they couldn't just go over Wi-Fi. But that was another thing that we ended up doing, was segmenting, and it became more complicated. But what is the pineapple thing? We learned there was some pretty
Wi-Fi
crazy
pineapple, or the other new thing, I forget what it's called, but the something or another. Yeah.
There's crazy little appliance devices that are like running off of Raspberry Pi, and any kind of script kiddie can plug this sucker into your network and, scan all the ports, identify everything, find the machines. And I think I'm sure that there are folks out there in school districts that have not segmented their networks into VLANs appropriately, move servers onto the cloud, and just also practice data backup. So let me throw this one out. I learned about this from my sister. My sister actually works for a dental software company in Kansas City, and I had not heard about this. Had you heard about the cyber attack for United Healthcare?
No.
It's crazy. So this is a Politico article from the 18th of March. And the headline is 4 big questions for DC following the massive healthcare attack. And so their Change Healthcare Systems was processing like 80% of all the insurance claims for dental nationwide. And their system was hacked. They paid the ransomware, but they didn't get any of their data back. They just got their system again. And so what my sister has been doing along with the team is working many long hours. They were able to get their system patched to work with another system, but then that one was so overwhelmed, they were not going to let them. And literally all these providers couldn't get paid. And we're talking about 80% of all the claims, going through this third party. So this is an example of how dominoes can fall when it comes to cyber attacks and things like that. And so while you may not have experienced the effect of this directly, if you're not involved in healthcare, which can include, dental care as well, this can absolutely devastate an industry, and it's been a crippling attack. I'll just read the first couple paragraphs. The crippling hack U.S. officials long feared looked nothing like they expected. The February 21st cyber attack on medical billing processor Change Healthcare didn't flatten power grids or poison water supplies, but by forcing the $13 billion company offline, it severed one of the few links connecting healthcare providers to insurance firms, and it triggered a cash crunch at hospitals, health clinics, and pharmacies nationwide. So you can read the rest of the article. But again, this was totally something that I missed, and I feel like I'm trying to stay fairly up on tech news. And so, our goal here at the EdTech Situation Room is not to scare you, but it is to become aware of things. And I think these kinds of articles and these kinds of issues need to have much more coverage in mainstream media. And part of the reason why we may not have the support for, investing in cybersecurity is that, I don't know if it's a Chicken Little thing or we're just tired of hearing these reports, but this is a big deal. So you hadn't heard of this either. I'm not the only one to be in the dark about it.
No, but I mean, I get obviously none of it's a surprise, but the fact that I haven't heard about it suggests that I think this is happening so often now that it's a really it's a sign of the times, right? But I would go a step further to say that it kind of reminds me of the time during the pandemic. I just said the words "the time during the pandemic," which I still can't believe that was a thing here. But where they talk about global supply chains, right? And that global supply chains are so efficient and are so based on real-time data of supply and demand that one little thing falling out of place, like the global shipping market, and it throws the whole system into chaos. And more importantly, there's no storage of anything, right? The goods that you're using, even if they're produced internationally and shipped to you, were created in a factory or a plant, months before, not years before. And there just wasn't a whole lot of, stock up, as it turns out. And when you talk about this notion that this situation created a cash crunch at, retail pharmacies,
and
right?
still is.
Yeah.
It's ongoing. This is not resolved.
It just tells you like that there isn't a whole lot of slack in our systems. And that's why cybersecurity remains really that important, right? Like if we're reliant on these systems, and I'm not saying that we should go off these systems or, adopt paper journals again. I'm not saying that at all, but it just does highlight the risks here, right? And it's not a riskless situation to leave, security holes in your network.
We need to think about vulnerabilities. And I know that for our family, we had kind of gotten in the habit of not keeping a really stocked pantry, because it's just real easy to go down the street and go to the grocery store. So the pandemic did encourage us to have a little bit more saved back. And, we all need to think about these things on a personal level as well as a societal level. And, preparing for some emergencies and things like that definitely makes some sense. So, well, hey, we have been halfway through the show and we have not talked about AI yet, but that may be by design. Do you want to hit a couple things before that, or should we jump into the AI?
Continue with our Deputy Downer show tonight. Let's talk about that New York Times article about insurance.
Okay. And this was also... Was this hard fork too? I think it was. Wasn't it the second?
It was
half
hard
of the hard
fork, and then I've now seen like 5 or 6 different YouTube videos about it too.
Do you want to take it and start it?
Well, I think it's your article, but
okay. I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So the headline from the New York Times, and this is from March 11th: automakers are sharing consumers' driving behavior with insurance companies. And the first thing I would say is that, as a couple that has moved 1,000 miles across the country and, gotten a new house and different things with insurance and whatnot, we have taken a look at our options as far as insurance. And with multiple companies, you can have a discount if you will run their app and basically allow them to track you nonstop. And so what this article reveals, and again, the Hard Fork podcast, we probably just can't recommend enough. Kashmir Hill is the author of this piece, and she was interviewed on Hard Fork. It would be one thing if companies were disclosing this and you knew, like I'm talking about with the insurance company, hey, you have a 5% or 10% discount if you run the app and let us track you everywhere, which, by the way, we decided not to do. But what this article reveals in her investigation is that companies are not telling people. And in some cases, they're saying like, hey, you get 30 days of OnStar free. But even if you don't continue after the trial, the tracking is still on. And all of that data is then being sold to data brokers. And so the strongest takeaway I have from this is going to sound like a broken record because we say it on the show multiple times. Folks, we need to have some privacy protection in the United States. And I'm not saying we need exactly GDPR, which is what Europe passed for privacy protection, but we need some privacy protection. I think I mentioned maybe the last time or one of our recent shows that because of filling out a possible application, by filling out an application for a possible refinance of our house, both my wife and my phones have absolutely exploded with text messages as well as phone recorded messages. and to the point where, our phones aren't useless, but I mean, we're getting sometimes over 50 phone calls and texts a day. It's just obscene. And it's another sign of the times, which this article reflects. And that is that the attention economy is out of control. We've got all kinds of folks gathering data, not even, notifying consumers in some cases of the gathering of that data, selling it, profiting from it. And there's really nothing at this point we can do as consumers other than get on a podcast on StreamYard, I guess, and complain about it. I mean, we don't have legal recourse at this point.
By the way, I am going to order my file. We have not experienced a significant increase in car insurance, and I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think I'm an unsafe driver, but based on the standards they were talking about in the Hard Fork podcast and also in a couple of the articles on this issue, I probably do brake a little hard sometimes. I also probably speed a little bit on the interstates. I'm not talking about 120 miles an hour, but Montana, at one point had no speed limit in recent memory, and also our interstate speed limit's 80 miles per hour. So I've also been pulled over recently for speeding, and Montana famously has, for most smaller speeding tickets, a $20 ticket you pay in cash right at the point of damage, and also
that sounds a little bit like what I experienced in Mexico.
Yeah, different kind of deal. Luckily, I don't think it goes well, I'd be more comfortable if it went directly to a cop as opposed to maybe some other places, but. The point being that it's just outrageous, in part because, I mean, you can't even find out what your score is. You can order your report, but also insurance companies are making judgments based off what I'm assuming is some kind of a logarithmic guess at risk. But that just seems like one piece of data that's used to create a kind of a rough situation, potentially for people that utilize their car for life-sustaining purposes.
And this article talks about a gentleman who basically almost couldn't get insurance. I think they said he was denied by like 5 different companies. It's like, what's going on? Well, he had been tracked and all this was happening and it was having a direct result. So we will sometimes lament China. And I'm not saying the United States is equivalent to China, but there are a lot of similarities because of the attention economy and the brokering of data and all of this kind of thing to what China does in terms of its citizens and decisions that are made and things that are opaque that you cannot see. So kudos to you, Jason, for requesting your file. We will look forward to hearing that report. And, at some point, I'm not at a spot like that in my life right now, but I think trying to pursue this, and we've read about different people, I think, that have tried, like what all is in my file. And Kashmir Hill, I think, pulled her file and, found there were some things that were just absolutely not true. But I don't know, like a credit report, if we have recourse, because legally you can contest things and get it removed from your credit report and whatever. I don't know if that's the case with this kind of data gathering. So.
Well, and even then, remember that credit ratings are run by private companies, right? These are not a government created, and I'm not sure if that's better or worse, but I think it's important to remember that these situations are regulated, but they're not controlled by the government. And again, I'm sure that inspires a argument with others, but the bottom line is that there just seems to be an awful lot riding sometimes on these situations that are gathering data without your consent.
I'd love to talk about this DFR Lab article and then have you talk a little bit about Princess Kate, because I've heard a little bit of the Princess Kate stuff. This one I just saw today. It is from March 18th, but it's from DFR Lab, and it's by Dina Sadek and then Andy Carvin. And I know Jason knows Andy Carvin, or that familiar name, and probably many others listening to the podcast do as well. This is a fantastic article, I think, to share with anyone, irrespective of political party or whatever kind of bent that somebody has in terms of of their political views. And what it talks about is that in times of conflict, it can be very challenging today to consume information, and that we need to be really careful not only consuming it but also sharing it. And so it talks about, considering your own biases, considering the source and the context, considering the platform that's being used. And there's a case study that they provide. It's excellent. And I think this would be an ideal session for librarians, public librarians, to offer something to talk about with parents. If you have any kind of series like we used to have called Parent University, these kinds of media literacy skills are essential for everyone. And I thought that was a very well-written article, and it's done in, I think, of a very politically agnostic way, which hopefully would mean it would be received well. What about Kate and the photo?
Well, this is part of a much longer story. Kate Middleton, Princess Catherine, as I believe that she is known now, it has not been in direct public view for some time, and she supposedly had surgery in the end of 2023 and hasn't been publicly since then. There's been accusations of body doubles, but there is a bizarre thing happened on British Mother's Day, which was a week and a half or so back. There was a picture released of Kate Middleton and her 3 children, and it took about 11 nanoseconds for even the untrained eye to see there's something super off about that photo. And the hands of the kids were in like twisted strangely, and there was a lot of kind of odd phenomenon to it. And of course, when I first heard this story, I thought, oh no, AI generated, right? Like, this is not good situation. But it's created some hubbub. Finally, several news services put a kill order out,
which I've never even heard of that before.
Yeah, it's a relatively rare thing and happens only a couple of times a year, usually with major news agencies. But if they get to a point where a picture or an article has substantial problems with it, to a point that they don't want anyone else publishing it, they issue a kill order, which is basically don't use this, right? Or use it at your own peril. And then a couple days later, the palace put out a press release, supposedly being a message from Kate Middleton, saying that she made some, or as an amateur photographer, she has experimented in Photoshop, and obviously my Photoshop skills aren't very good. And what is interesting about this is, if half of the interest in Kate Middleton's location and the number of amateur tech sleuths that have been kind of released on Catherine's whereabouts, if we did that with our own government, we'd probably be in better shape right now as a country, as it turns out. But it does tell you the extraordinary trouble that we are in regarding the future of media and the future of what is obviously called the truth. And what's interesting about this is that, for me, I think it even goes a step further, in that I do think that there are at some point going to be technological tools that give us some peace of mind, or at least give us some ability to track some of these pieces. But what I think is super interesting about all these stories is that it's kind of kicking up the conversation of, do we want to start creating a method to talk about the provenance of these tools? And I say the answer is absolutely yes. But that's where I think the blockchain could end up being the right technology for the time, because the point behind the blockchain is that all the metadata that goes along with the blockchain, it could be attached to an image, so you know exactly where it came from, or who modified it, under what conditions it was modified, and why it was modified. But I find this article to be interesting, mostly for the people watching. I'm obviously would not wish any ill will on Kate Middleton. But what I would say, though, is that the interesting part of the story for me is the amount of amateur sleuthing and questions about the provenance of photographs and all media is absolutely going to be challenged in the age of AI.
Yep, that is definitely one thing everyone can agree on is our AI tools are just going to lead to more of a polluted landscape. So, shall we jump into that pollution?
Yeah, here we go. Let's see if we can cover AI in 13 minutes. Well, let's just talk about this very briefly. Because we skipped it last time too. Elon Musk sued OpenAI because they aren't open, and then OpenAI released a blog post that basically said this lawsuit is invalid, and here's a bunch of emails from Elon disproving his some of the claims he's making in his lawsuit, and they're going to go back and forth about this. And then recently, Mr. Musk then released the chatbot code for Grok, which is still something I've never used, but Grok, so that it could be used, it could be open source, which is part of what he claims OpenAI can do. This whole story kind of annoys me, but what I would say is that this is a lot of the wild card information, in my humble opinion, about AI, because we just don't know how a lot of these company issues are going to shake down.
Well, and the other thing is that we cannot put the genie back into the bottle. It's not just because of Elon Musk releasing Grok. It's because of Stable Diffusion and other platforms. But, as much as we would hope that OpenAI and Microsoft and these other companies, Claude, are going to be able to have guardrails, the open sourcing of these tools means that anybody who would like to run these on their own device and wants to geek out a little bit, and that bar probably continues to come down in terms of what's required, is going to be able to do it and create anything they want. So I think that we have been bracing for some significant disinformation disruption in a US election for a while. I know I was surprised in 2020 that we didn't have more events, and we talked a couple of weeks ago about a robocall related to the Biden campaign, I think up in New Hampshire. It was in New England, and and I think we even had an article about that saying that's the tip of the iceberg. So unfortunately more is coming. So what do we do? Part of what we can do is try to help people with media literacy skills. But the larger issues, or the bigger things that need to probably happen, do involve tech platforms. And I don't think we're going to see any meaningful regulation and change on those in the near term. Let's see. What about Microsoft? Did you see this? That Copilot, I guess, has full access. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I don't think you need to log in to get access to it. And one of the points
to ChatGPT 4, what we've been paying $20 a month
ChatGPT 4 Turbo,
it's free. It's
right?
free.
And it's Microsoft free, which means that, it does have all of its protections built into it. But yeah, it is absolutely available. And it's also the reason why that, a lot of times when I talk about AI to teachers and administrators, that it's very important, like super duper important, not to think that a block or a filter is going to keep this out of kids' hands, because most of our kids have smartphones, and even if they're not subscribed to one of the great models, there are still wonderful models available for free for students that, again, could be harnessed for good, but in a lot of cases will not be. And I think we need to be very, very cognizant of that and understand that we have to shift some things in education, whether we like it or not.
That Thurrott article that you put in, that I dropped in the chat, says that in order to build custom GPTs, you still do need to pay. So you need to be on Copilot Pro in order to build a custom GPT. And if you're not familiar with that, that means that you can basically create a sophisticated prompt that's saved that you can then use repeatedly, and not just have to be sort of building your prompt from scratch. And I would think another benefit, because I'm still keeping my OpenAI subscription, is that chat archive of all past conversations, and then being able to go back to those. I have not used Copilot since this announcement, so I don't know. I would assume, of course, you're going to have to be logged in if you want to be saving a chat log. But have you played with it enough to be able to know about any of those differences yet?
I haven't, but especially if you're using it for nefarious purposes, is maybe not the word I'm looking for, but being a naughty person with it, I mean, you wouldn't need any of those extra features, right? Like that's I think a really important part of this. But I mean, I guess I would also uh, give kudos out to Microsoft for making this available. I do think. Well, I was thinking about this the other day. I do think that one of his strategies, I'm sorry, one of Microsoft's strategies might be that if they can give AI out enough for free, then no one's going to pay for ChatGPT 4, and maybe ultimately then gives them more access, or maybe even the ability to subsume OpenAI into Microsoft. That's pretty cynical, although we live in cynical times for sure. But I would have concern if Microsoft owned that on their own.
Peggy said she has not used a Copilot yet. I have not used it extensively. I just dropped in the link to a make use of article from 6 days ago, whatever that was, the 14th. 4 reasons to use Microsoft Copilot instead of ChatGPT. So in addition to ChatGPT 4 Turbo being available free, this article says that Copilot has better internet access and search than OpenAI's ChatGPT. It also has free DALL-E image generation. So image generation is something I am doing basically every single day for different things. And that was something that you had to pay for. You couldn't just use the free version of OpenAI's ChatGPT to get that. And then the 4th reason is it says that Copilot is integrated into the larger Microsoft ecosystem. And I will predict that we are going to see that kind of differentiation as Microsoft offers more features built into Office 365, as Google brings Gemini into the Google application, Google Docs, Gmail, all of that world, calendar. It's going to be incredibly powerful once we can trust some of these tools to help us filter emails and to, be able to help at least, draft email replies and do all kinds of things from a personal productivity standpoint. So yeah, I think it's going to be super interesting. And the thing that surprised me the most, was that idea that, hey, you don't need to pay to generate images or to use ChatGPT 4 Turbo. Just come use it free here. So I wonder if that reflects some conflict between the OpenAI teams and Microsoft, because that doesn't seem like a real collaborative sort of arrangement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. And it's I was working on a presentation with a couple of my colleagues last week on the AI framework that we've released in Montana. And one of the conversations we had during that presentation, and we had pulled in, I think it was some Oxford University research, the vast majority of media produced about AI in mainstream media is quoting AI companies, and much smaller categories include ethicists and people commenting on that on the implications of that, but rather it's hype from the companies. And I think that's part of the reason why that there are so many people that just don't get it, right? And again, it's not, I don't blame them for that. I just don't know if you were a even mildly curious person where necessarily you'd find out more easily, right? Because I've experimented with this. If you go and type in artificial intelligence, which there are plenty of people that say that that AI is different than generative AI, and I believe they're right about that. But even if I go to Google right now and type in artificial intelligence, there is a non-ChatGPT company called, oh no, that's sponsored. So the first real links are AI from, what is AI from the SAS Institute? What is AI from IBM? What is AI from Encyclopedia Britannica? What is AI from Motley Fool? What is AI from Wikipedia? What is AI from Google Cloud? And nothing about ChatGPT. Right? Like, and so even if you're a casual user, typing in artificial intelligence into Google doesn't get you the tools that are making all the hubbub right now, right? And I just I know, and maybe I'm myself weaving my own conspiracy theory in my head, but I just feel like that this is sneaking up on us more than we want it to. And I don't think Wes and I are the Lorax of AI or anything, but we should be taking this seriously as a big culture changer.
Peggy is asking in the chat. She wonders if they're going to start charging and what the Copilot AI can do compared to ChatGPT. I think since it's turbo, it's the same, Peggy. I mean, it can do all the same things. It's just that you can't create these custom GPTs unless you're paying Microsoft or you're paying OpenAI. And also to be clear, there are paid versions of both. You can get Copilot Pro just as you can do ChatGPT Pro. Let's do a quick Google AI article. So this was interesting. This is Ars Technica from the 13th of March. Google's Gemini AI now refuses to answer election questions. And I haven't had this happen as much recently, Jason, but I mean, there's been some frustration that I've had, I guess, sometimes over image generation. And some of this, I just taught a 6-week professional development micro-credential course on teaching the conspiracies and anything that had to do with political polarization. ChatGPT's like, no, I will not make any kind of image about that. And so this is interesting that Google is putting in that guardrail for its Gemini AI as well, saying that it's just going to completely opt out of election-related responses. Now, I'm sure that Google is feeling a bit gun shy because of the big embarrassment that happened a couple of weeks ago over, images that were, people of color in Nazi uniforms and things like that. But it's, it's interesting. This is also alignment, right? And to what values are these tools being aligned? And then also, just how is fear of, bad press and bad PR, shaping things as well. Have you played with Gemini that much since it's changed from Bard?
Yeah, a bit. And then I also have access to Gemini 1.5. I requested that during the beta, and Google's AI Studio is a pretty good tool that allows you to kind of play with future models. I mean, it's good in that there's a lot of things it's really good at, but I just don't think it's competitive with either Claude or ChatGPT when it comes to particularly writing things or kind of informing you about things. It seems to hallucinate a lot more than say ChatGPT, even 3.5.
How about Adobe Firefly? Have you played with that one much? Because I have not yet.
You know what? It's funny because I haven't played at all with it, to be honest.
Yeah, I've got a few folks I follow that are Adobe advocates and employees that, of course, are talking about that. So that's on my list to play with. Any other of the AI experiments that you? Oh, I want to know what I would ask you. Did I tell you about the Stephen Johnson podcast about Google Notebook LM? Had I shared that?
No.
I don't. Okay, so Stephen Johnson is one of my absolute favorite authors of all time. Where do good ideas come from? He's written The Ghost Ship and Extra Life, and I love him as an author. And he was tagged by Google to develop Notebook LM. And he has had the system, I think it's called Spark, for writing, sort of like that idea of a, GTM. No, is it GTN? No, it's Getting Things Done. GTD, right?
GTD,
David Allen,
yeah.
Getting Things Done. You have a trusted place where you're dumping everything. But as an author, he would do that. But Notebook LM is created so that you have this writing assistant that's going to be able to make connections and suggestions. And so just the fact that he is a primary consultant with Google on that makes me really want to play more with Notebook LM, and I have not played with it extensively, but I'll try to dig that podcast up. I think, it was something that he shared on his Substack, and I'll dig it up and send it to you because it was really good. So, any other experiment stuff you want to share?
No, I think in a future episode, I've been doing some interesting things too, from the standpoint of trying to find new and interesting ways to kind of organize the amount of information I'm having to track, even more than it ever has been. But I think that's good for another show.
Okay, I'll drop in this link. I went ahead and consolidated most of my AI-related resources and links. It's just ai.westfryer.com. I gave a couple presentations in Kansas with my dad's Rotary Club and a local, his retirement community. And I think I'm probably going to be writing a book called Stories About AI. So that is a slideshow about that and just a few other related resources, some of which we've already talked about on the show before. Awesome. Well, Dr. Neiffer, I'm looking at the time. Where did it all go?
Yeah, that's a good question we ask every week. Hey, I'll do a quick geek of the week and hand it over to you. I mentioned this already a couple weeks back on the podcast, but my crew at the University of Montana, the Montana Digital Academy offices, are hosting an education forum in July. It's the middle week of July. It's called Innovation Runs Through It. It's our second annual event, and we'll be featuring great speakers on AI and proficiency-based education and blended learning and online learning, and featuring our wonderful EdReady tool that we provide for schools across Montana and can hook you up with outside the state as well. Please come. It's an inexpensive event. The hotels are no more expensive than a big city event, but the advantage is you get to hang out in beautiful Missoula in a beautiful time of year. So innovation runs through it.com. What about you, Dr. Fryer?
Are you listening to Tech Policy Press? Is that a podcast that's on your list?
Should I?
Okay, I think you should. So I'm going to do a overshare, but my first is the Tech Policy Press episode from March 10th. It's called "Exploring the Intersection of Information Integrity, Race, and U.S. Elections," and it's a real fantastic panel and just an absolutely great dive into many of the issues that we talk about with respect to media literacy and the information landscape, but also how it intersects with elections and democracy and things like that. Next thing is just a quick note. Jason, did you know that our Mastodon.education server, which is where our EdTech Situation Room Mastodon account is actually blocked by Mastodon.cloud? And it is
really?
Yeah, it's crazy. So if you just go to mastodon.cloud/about, it has a list of all the instances which are blocked. And this is one of the things that, could be good, because in the Fediverse, which is what Mastodon is, you have this, decentralized moderation. And it can give reasons, but it doesn't give a reason. So I need to go ahead and contact the administrators that I think are in Japan. The company that runs Mastodon.cloud has both offices in Japan and the United States. But that is odd. And I don't know why that server, which I assume is primarily filled with, educational people, since it's Mastodon.education. So that's interesting. And then last thing is we talked about TikTok quite a bit already. Back on March 8th, I think I wrote a little post called War Over TikTok, and it's just got some of my ideas about this proposed legislation. And what I didn't say in there that, I said tonight is that I don't think it's going to really pass, but it certainly has led to a lot of headlines. But there's other things that are also important to talk about. So I'm glad we got to visit about those tonight.
Okay, Dr. Fryer, where can people find you on the interwebs?
westfryer.com. How about you, humanish Neiffer?
I am at aicentrist.com. But hey, this here is the EdTech Situation Room. We're a once-a-week podcast on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, sometime in the middle of the night UTC. And as we're going to find out in 5 or 6 weeks, what time is it in Japan, as I will be visiting there and broadcasting live from Japan with Dr. Fryer. But hey, in the meantime, please download us wherever finer podcasts are aggregated. You can go to our website, edtechsr.com. You can go to our Facebook page or YouTube page and get the episodes as soon as we're done recording each Wednesday night, or wait until the podcast feed updates and then listen to it conveniently on your media player. Dr. Fryer, you wanted to say?
We do also have a new logo and a updated brand, so you can give us some feedback and let us know. But since we have not been using the Bird site for a number of weeks and even maybe months, we needed to get that updated. So, of course, we have a partially AI-generated logo for our show. So you may notice that in your podcatcher.
So check that out, and we hope to see you next time on the EdTech Situation Room. Have a great night.
Good night, everybody.